What's up, everyone? It's 2 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, which means you're tuning in to Cannabis Legalization News. I'm producer Lauren, and today we're going to be speaking with Arman Zeytounyan, the co-founder of EcoWaste Services. But first, we're going to get into a little bit of cannabis news. So what's up, Miggy and Tom? What's going on in cannabis news this week?
Hey, Lauren.
Hey, Lauren, how are you? Well, not all that much. I think the biggest cannabis news this week is that, welcome back, Miggy. How was taking your kid to college? Tell us about the illegal times that you had to experience, because, you know, we're sitting here in Illinois and Seattle now. So, man, it's nice to have cannabis laws like that. How were they in Idaho?
Scary. The whole time was scary. As soon as you cross the border. Matter of fact, I just saw a video today. Officers in Idaho down in Route 84 are they're blatantly pulling cars over coming from Oregon. I mean, there was a blatant video.
Just like basically a traffic stop right on the border. Oh, I could see Indiana doing that. I could see Iowa doing that. Maybe not Wisconsin or Missouri, but I could also see Wisconsin and Missouri doing that.
Yeah, no, we were scared. And you know, I did, of course, have some stuff on me, but it would have been a consumption issue, and it had been like personal consumption. And, you know, of course, this is the risk you take when you're when you believe in something, you know?
Yeah. And then, but did you buy any illegal weed while you were there, or did you bring your own legal weed?
Oh, I just brought my own legal weed.
Oh, that's good.
Illegal as soon as I crossed the line.
Well, it's always illegal federally, but that was probably some of the largest news that it is. All the Illinois producers and all the producers and the MSOs are coming out about how safe their extraction products are and how safe their vapes are, as opposed to these unlawful vapes. That was the other really large news story. And then Trump just came out today and said, well, let me just share my screen real quick. Trump just said it today. He wants to ban all of these flavored vapes. What do you think about that? Is the ban of the flavored vapes going to help dent this vaping crisis?
I think, once again, it's the government protecting us, and when it shouldn't be. Vapes are like
that's your wonderful libertarian brand of America that you have in Washington State. I can't believe the government needs to come in to help you.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, vapes have been around for 10, 15 years. We would have seen something like this 10, 15 years ago.
Right. But then what they weren't vaping 10 to 15 years ago was THC or cannabis oil. And so it has to be the black market showing its ugly head again, but responding to the lawful market, because vapes are quite popular amongst the legalized states. In Illinois, it's like 50% concentrate in vapes. What's your percentage of concentrate products that go down in Washington?
You know, I really don't know the numbers, but just even for a sick person, though, concentrate is how the preferred method, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Rick Simpson oil, like, you know, concentrate where you really have the medicine, that, like, not necessarily your shatters or your THCA isolate, but when they have that full spectrum type Rick Simpson oil, where they have all the terpenoid profiles that were also extracted from the plant, and that plant might be blended with THC, other cannabinoids, and CBD.
Yeah, all of it. You know, it's and then again, too, the endocannabinoid system, a sick person might prefer a special, like, shatter dabbing. I know a guy who was born with his stomach inside out and his arm deformed.
Wow, that's a thing. He was born with his stomach inside out. That sounds like one of those Ripley's Believe It or Not type of stories. I can't believe that.
Yeah. No, the guy's a great guy. He's actually a performer, too, out here in Washington. He goes by the name Timmy. And he raps and whatnot, but he dabs like a beast. Like, when I did the 1 gram dab challenge, I thought I almost died. But
yeah, that was funny.
You know, but people who are in serious pain and sick, they can consume that much in one sitting and walk away feeling fine. You don't die from this.
No, you do not die from it, and it continues to grow, which I think gets to the next really large story in cannabis legalization news for the first week of September of 2019, and that was the American Bankers Association predicting that the Safe Banking Act will pass by next month, and that is, of course, October. And we've been talking about that here on the show for months, how we think that the Safe Banking Act will passed because of the budget that's coming up. And next month, October, that's when the budget expires, because the fiscal year for the federal government goes from October 1st through September 30th. And me being a weird, a history buff and kind of a nerd, I always think that's one of the reasons why the third quarter is one of the worst quarters in the stock market, because, government gridlock comes up and they shut it down, and then things don't get paid. But also, it looks like the way that they legalized hemp last year might be the way that they legalize commercial banking in cannabis this year. That would be pretty darn awesome.
Now, are you saying like two bills kind of going through? Is that how they're going to process? I know they're petitioning for it.
Like what they do is they have floor action on this bill because it made it out of committee, so it does come up for a vote. But then they could always table that vote, and then they have the budget vote that comes up. And much like with the 2018 Farm Bill, where they had those things on the budget, then they eventually stuck it into the budget in the omnibus spending bill, as opposed to one of the continuing CRs, they call them, the continuing resolutions to help continue to fund the government so it doesn't shut down all at once. It shuts down like in smaller and smaller stages. But then they passed the budget for this year, which is going to be up here in 3 weeks. And so they're going to be arguing over the budget, and hopefully the Safe Banking Act either passes by itself or becomes a rider on the budget and then passes when they fund the government for next year, which they're going to do, because there's no way that Trump is shutting down the government and running for president on it. No way.
Yeah. No, that's going to be exciting. And then at that point, when that happens, it'll kind of help just reaffirm that this is a legit industry, or that people who are in the cannabis industry.
Oh, I bet, it's going to reaffirm that it's a legit industry. But how is it out in Seattle? I mean, Washington State, don't you guys still get like kind of pushed around and not taken seriously?
Yeah, well, the consumer is not taken seriously. It's, we're run by a government body called the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. Mm-hmm. They created an infrastructure it's kind of shit. I mean, they did great with creating the seed to sell tracking system, as far as that's being a concern. They've created great rights for workers. Now people, minimum wage they're entitled to days off. These are things that weren't happening before under labor laws.
So you guys, when you first legalized, you had to insert these labor protections. Illinois has already unpacked that, it seems, and they've already inserted a lot of the labor protections, but they extend protections also to the employers themselves, and says that they can continue to maintain that drug-free workplace. But I've seen these types of lawsuits for workers' rights having greater and greater results in the states whose statute actually provide for them. So I'm glad that Washington State is finally kind of catching up to that.
Yeah, finally. I mean, there is something going through, I believe, for protecting employers, employees in Washington State. Unlike recently, Nevada, New York, and Oklahoma all passed workers' rights where they're allowed to, test positive.
Yeah, that's the way that it's going. But then, the way that it's written in Illinois is that you can have a drug-free work zone, and then you can also not have them using or testing positive for cannabis be the sole factor that you fire them, which basically just means like, well, let's go over their most recent performance review. I mean, give them any reason. Just so they don't have one reason that they got fired. They have at least 2 or 3 reasons that we got fired. I mean, that's how I like to do my business. I'd fire you, but I don't have enough reasons yet.
It's kind of like when a cop pulls you over and says, "I think I smell crime going on right now. Let me investigate further."
Is that some crimes that I smell? And then they don't have that anymore. A lot of the canines are getting retired out in rural Illinois, but that just kind of means that, like, wow, really, is the only reason we had these canines was so they could smell for carafine and pinene on these cannabis arrests? That's it. They weren't trained to smell bombs. They weren't trained to smell like cocaine. They weren't trained to smell dangerous stuff. It was just trained to smell flowers from cannabis. That was tough, but
yeah. No, it's and there's the other claim with the cops or the police enforcement where they're like, we're going to lose jobs or lose revenue now because we can't arrest. this is your only reason. This is your justification for putting people in jail and ruining lives.
Right. And like, you want to stop progress? Because I mean, our guest that's coming on is one of the many types of businesses that are out there that are ancillary to the cannabis industry. But if you are enjoying this cannabis legalization news, I got something for you. You can always find us on our podcast now. So we take this live episode and then we actually publish it to a podcast. So just Google Cannabis Legalization News Podcast, and then you can take us with you when you're like on your commute to work. How is your commute to work, dude?
Oh, I'm all about the bus.
You take the bus, do you? Oh, yeah, nice.
Well, after driving 3,800 miles for 6 days, I love my bus driver now.
Don't want to drive no more. Yeah, it was a couple of weeks that you were gone, but you successfully got your kid to college, huh?
Well, again, and according to most people, as a cannabis consumer, I couldn't do something like this. I couldn't hold a 9 to 5. I couldn't have a kid that rides a bike or, goes to college, succeeds in life.
Oh, yeah. Would you have a kid that would be able to do, let's see here. What about this? So you just wrote this new article, right?
Yeah. So that's the latest Washington State, what's going wrong with our legalization. A friend of mine was out here for Seattle Hemp Fest and was denied the use of his Blackfeet tribe ID, federally recognized ID, was denied use of it to acquire cannabis. And when he contacted me and said, is this true? Does Washington State not recognize Blackfeet tribe? I was like, no, this can't be true because Washington State has many tribes of their own. Matter of fact, Washington State has agreements with the tribes. It's an intercommerce agreement where the tribes won't undersell them. They'll play by the rules. But I went to the website and sure as shit, Washington State only recognizes 18 tribes out of the 527 odd tribes that are in America.
Yeah, but how many tribes are in Washington State, and how is it defined? Like, are they only supposed to be supporting the tribes that are like in their state? Or I am not an Indian. I'm sorry, I am not a Native American law lawyer. I just don't know anything about it. But
no, I agree. But the biggest issue though is it's a federally recognized ID that they can use for passports to go to Canada. Canada recognizes ID. He can walk into Canada at that moment using his federally recognized tribe ID, but he can't acquire cannabis in Washington State, which, there's so many nuances of this law that they haven't really figured out. So,
yeah. Well, we don't really have any Native Americans in the state of Illinois, but it's definitely going to be something that has to be visited on that state by state or area by area basis wherever they are located. And I'm sure that's going to be something that continues to evolve, just like this law.
Well, I'm sure you had them at one time.
I don't know, man. Illinois, how long ago that's been a long time ago since Illinois got rid of Native Americans. I mean, that's just a byproduct of the 19th century. I wasn't there at the time. They were coming through and they meant business.
There's no reservations in Illinois?
I don't know. It would be news to me. I've never heard of them. Like, I think there's some in Wisconsin because they actually have Indian casinos there. There may be tribes in Illinois. That's something that I could ask the Google. I don't think I've ever asked Google that. That's how often it comes up.
Well, I mean, there's definitely competition when it comes to state commerce, and that's what they're dealing with here. But let's talk to Arman.
Arman? Yeah. Well, we have to. Arman, man. Lauren, why don't you introduce the guest?
This is Arman Zeytounyan, the co-founder of EcoWaste Services. Can you tell us more about your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So EcoWaste Services, we're actually a cannabis waste management company. I know right off the bat, a lot of people are going to be curious about cannabis wastes, and I'd love to get into it. But in a nutshell, what we do is we provide a management service for the cannabis waste material. We do the whole process as far as the transporting, the compliance end of it, and then the disposal end of it. And we've been doing it in SoCal since maybe beginning of last year, and kind of looking to keep on going.
It's required, right? What are the requirements in California regarding cannabis waste? Because that's one of the secrets of legal cannabis. They really track it through harvest, and like after the harvest, is that really when your company comes in and provides their value?
Well, it depends. So, I mean, we work with everybody on the supply chain, but to use the cultivators as an example, yeah, when there's the whole track and trace compliance here in California, and they have to track everything from seed to sale, right? But there's the back end of that where they also need to track what they don't use. So let's say something doesn't sell, or something is expired, or didn't pass testing, or they just outright, can't use it anymore for some reason. They need to dispose of it, and they need to have that done in a specific format, in a specific process, and they need to have documentation for that. So we kind of come in and we handle that for them.
So they can find you. I don't mean to cut you off there, Miggy. I guess we can go to that instead.
All right, good.
That's the question, man.
Oh no, I was just saying, because I'm looking at the website. Well, you just pulled up, and he's got listed cultivators, dispensaries, extractions, testing labs, distributions, and fusions. I mean, you must have your hands upon with all these different parts of the industry, which is, again, like you were saying earlier, Tom, about how you have this base of industry, then now you got all the auxiliary stuff on the side. Like this guy, which it's pretty awesome to see. Like, what would you do for the labs? You're helping the labs get rid of the products they tested that day.
Yeah, so I mean, labs are a very interesting angle because they actually have different types of waste materials besides cannabis waste. So they have multiple categories where they'd have, let's say, they'd sometimes have cannabis waste on itself, where it's considered non-hazardous material or non-biological, meaning it's just the organic cannabis material that they're testing. But they also have hazardous, and they also have biological waste, which we take care of in our sister company, actually. But we also do service them through EcoWaste for cannabis materials, because they have to get rid of that too. If it's a non-hazardous substance, they gotta classify it as a cannabis waste.
And then with the extractions, are you also getting rid of like the excess extractions that were in the process, or are you taking trim and turning that into an extraction?
So again, it depends on where it comes from. So for example, as a manufacturer, if they're making oil out of the biomass that they have, we take the biomass once it's dried up and there's less than 1% ethanol on it. If they're doing an ethanol extract, we take the biomass and we're working on turning that into a mulched product where we kind of put it back into the ecosystem. But if it has anything hazardous on it, like for example, those manufacturers, the ones that are making the oil, that might be classified as a hazardous waste substance, which is something we don't handle. We work with another company that does that.
So you mean that there's more than one type of cannabis waste out there? When you said waste oil, does that mean that the processors that are creating the cartridges that are so popular in the news, right? Well, the regulated producers aren't making them, but as a byproduct of that distillation or extraction process, as Miggy is demonstrating, that creates a different type of waste that needs to be handled?
Well, waste is a very broad category that has many different subcategories, right? But the byproduct itself, obviously we wouldn't be smoking or using anything that has ethanol on it. So anything that has hazardous on it wouldn't be in the legal system anyways. So that, like, let's say the byproduct and consumer ready product, let's say that needs to be disposed, we can take that as cannabis waste. But when they're doing the processing on the extracting side of it, the actual manufacturing side of it, when they extract the biomass, to make the oil, there's the biomass waste, and then there's the crude waste that could be considered hazardous. So there's different types of materials. That's usually case by case basis. We kind of have to go in there and kind of see what it is, and kind of understand exactly what type of waste it is. Because it's not just the BCC that we have to worry about. We have to worry about different departments, the Department of Health, Department of Toxic Substance Control. There's all these other kind of agencies that come into play with waste. So,
yeah, that's something with the cannabis laws. There is a lot of interagency overlap and interagency policing and regulation. And it's the same way in Illinois. Depending on what area you're working in with the plant, you're going to be dealing with a different type of federal agency. But I'd be really interested in hearing more about how you say that there's this differentiation amongst all these types of waste from the cannabis plant, depending on how it was produced. And especially there's some of the regulations in Illinois say that you actually have to destroy the material. So is there any type of regulations in California or your jurisdictions where you're providing services to your clients where you have to take certain precautions to literally destroy the seeds and stems and stalks and stuff that people usually just pitch anyway?
Right. So there's a lot of different language that kind of means different things, and a lot of the regulations here in California, they're still kind of figuring it out too. So they use a more general sense as far as when it comes to cannabis. Anything that's essentially classified as hazardous or biological, that has to be separated and handled differently. But if it's a plant material and it's bio-wet mass, we don't have to destruct it necessarily. We have to dispose of it or do something environmentally sustainable with it. They just have a nuance on the words that they use. So, for example, if it's something that's hazardous, that has to be destructed in a specific way that not even the cannabis regulators deal with. That's a completely different department already.
Do you, Arman, do you guys deal with, like, do you guys have any recycling programs? That's the one thing I hear in Washington State we failed at is as soon as the flower touches a container, it's no longer recyclable, even though it's plastics recyclable. We have a program out here. I've been trying to find it. I'll find it later, but these guys are taking all the containers and leaving boxes so you can bring your empty containers. So they'll take them and wash them and recycle them. That transition when it was medical, I was able to take my same container and just get that filled up. So that helped reduce the waste. Are you guys recycling or anything like that?
Yeah. So right now, we're working on collaborating with a company to help to do that with us, because we don't want to be the distributor for the recycled material or anything like that. We're just the waste management company, but we do collect the plastics and the glass jars mostly, and the Doob tubes, I think they're called. We do collect those, and we are working on getting those recycled and cleaned and put them back into the system, because we can't, since they're not CRV here in California, they're not registered glass. We can't, recycle them like traditional glass bottles and everything. So we're working on with some people, we're working on some companies to get that glass product recycled and back into the system so we don't waste it. And then, of course, we always recommend consumers to do that, to take their glass jars back to the retail shops. And then if they work with us, we will then, come by and collect it from them.
Fascinating. So, hey, are you seeing like more of the vape cartridges? Do you get to help recycle the vape cartridges or any of the other stuff that's, you were just mentioning Doob tubes? Or do you work on helping to recycle Doob tubes? And, isn't that just like you just put a new Doob in it and then you pop the lid on the tube and it's ready to go again, right?
In theory, yeah, but the way the regs are written is like you can't. There's a lot of, again, those little nuances that are not cleared up here in California. Like for a retailer, the ideal situation would be that they keep their own jars, recycle them, put it back into their own system. But it's unclear whether they're required to do that. Some of the people that come out to do the inspections on these businesses, they might not allow that. They might want them to dispose of it, send it to us for us to do that, and then give it back to them, which creates another link in that chain. The grape cartridges, though, that's a really interesting one. Me and Miggy and I were talking about it a little earlier. Those have, as far as we even looked into it, it is one of the most complicated things to handle, especially disposable vapes, because the disposable vapes, they're attached to the cartridge and the battery. The battery, like exactly, the battery.
Hang on, he's giving a
electronic waste.
So that's there was a glass right here. I just cracked it, but this be filled. It's a one-time use thing.
I'm glad that Miggy is giving a live demonstration of what we were discussing.
So those right there, basically, those they have two parts of it. There are two types of waste on that. There's the cannabis waste, which is the glass, or three types, I should say. There's the cannabis, which is the concentrate inside the cartridge. There's the glass, and there's the battery. They're all attached to one. Separating them and disposing them separately, near impossible. How are you supposed to do that? They don't separate. The batteries, you can't take them to an e-waste recycling center because it has cannabis on it. The cannabis, you can't take it and dispose it as cannabis because it has electronic waste on it. What do you do with them? That's the question that we've been trying to really figure out since we started. It's like what to do with those exactly.
Yeah, but what are we currently doing with them?
Just throwing them in landfills. They're
throwing them in landfills.
Yeah, throwing them away, and that's the improper way to handle it because there's multiple different parts to that. There's glass on it, which can be recycled if we figure out how to, of course. There's the cannabis oil in it. There might be some trace amounts, and the most importantly is the batteries. Those are creating those filling those up into landfills can be very dangerous because if they all collectively fill up, one little spark.
That's what kills me about these is it was given to me, a friend of mine, and I was like, no way, they have disposable freaking pens. Yeah. And then just yesterday I was in a shop buying some flour, and I saw a whole area, just disposable pens, and it kind of made me sad just thinking like all that shitty waste. I mean, these are only good for one time.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, they're totally sealed. Can't get the battery out. Can't add any more oil into it. It's a single use, and then you throw it away. And usually they have like the Fruity Pebbles flavor, which kind of gets back to like how Trump just directed the FDA to not have those types of fruity flavors that are marketed toward children. But you can't do that now, especially with Tobacco 21 in Illinois, at least. And it's a general law that's kind of sweeping all over the place. Even medical patients aren't allowed to buy vapes anymore if they're under 21. So they really are coming down, or flower. So like if you are a medical cannabis patient in Illinois right now, you might be able to buy Rick Simpson oil and other edibles, but until you're 21, they aren't allowing you to get vapes, which kind of stinks because like some people, that's the way that they need to actually take their medicine, especially when it's one of those types of diseases that cause a lot of nausea, and eating might just be, harder.
Arman, I saw that reading one of your interviews that your history is in a medical field. Is that what I?
Yeah. So before we started EcoWaste, we actually have been doing medical waste since 2011. It's called BioWaste, and very similar to EcoWaste, kind of where we got the name from. And that's kind of touches on what we were talking about a little bit earlier with different categories and everything. Medical waste is like needles, anything dealing with blood or bodily fluids and organs and stuff like that. We've been doing that since 2011, and that's kind of how we knew when this opportunity came up to us. That's how we knew that we'd be the right fit in doing the cannabis waste, is because we have that experience with specialized waste materials.
That seems like a pretty smooth transition from anybody in anything medical to cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, it works together, right? Like,
do you require a special license to be able to handle the cannabis waste?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that's something that I actually really do want to clarify, because there's some of our competitors, I won't call them out, but they claim that there's a license. There is no license. And it's kind of a conflict for me to say that, right? Because someone else hears it like there's no license, but
I'm getting in this industry next week.
Yeah, exactly. The BCC doesn't have a specific license. We just have to adhere to the regulations that they put forth for the operations.
And so BCC is a California. Which can you expand the BCC for the listeners that are outside the state?
Yeah, so the BCC is the Bureau of Cannabis Control. It's the overarching regulatory agency here in California. They're at the top of the pyramid, and they have other little agencies. And then
how old is that agency?
Since it became legalized in California, it's brand new.
Okay, so that's a great example, because right now in Illinois, we don't have the ICC or the BCC even, or whatever the corollary would be. It's all kind of compartmentalized. It's either going to be in one agency or the Department of Agriculture. I mean, they've really just split the plant in half, and they said, well, if you're selling at retail, talk to that agency. Right. Any other section of it, talk to this agency. And it'll be interesting to see if in more years it'll have something like that, but every state approaches their regulations a little differently.
Right. I mean, in California, it's similar too. We have our Department of Agriculture, where if you're for example, you're a cultivator, you would go through them, but they all still respond to this overarching kind of regulatory agency. So they just kind of created another like link in the hierarchy, really. But yeah, that's what the BCC is. They're the overarching regulatory agency here in California.
What's the next state for you, Arman? I mean, you guys are in California now, but where do you plan to expand to? Because I imagine somebody like you is needed in every state now that we have 9 legal states.
Yeah. We're debating where to go. I mean, the obvious answer would be go up north, head towards where you are in Washington, and then right next to us we can go to Nevada too. But we're kind of testing around to see what our options are. The states, every state is different. So we want to make sure that we can go to a state that, can actually take benefit from our service. The ideal solution would be to go all legal states at once. That's kind of what we're gearing towards. Maybe like building up a little bit more capital, building up a little bit more brand value, and then kind of just expanding all at once. But that's I
think that could be a difficult challenge simply because all the states are slightly different. When I hear your business model, I'm like, well, that's a fascinating business model. I'm not sure if you're able to do it in the state of Illinois, simply because you're going to be handling a particular part of the plant that they're under obligations to destroy this stuff.
Right.
Especially not necessarily the vape cartridges. Once it's in the retail customer's hand, they don't have the responsibility anymore to recycle or destroy it. But when you're done harvesting plants and you've clipped it all, and then the stuff that's left over, you have to destroy and render impossible. So I always just kind of figured that would be somebody, throwing it into a dumpster with a chipper and creating just stuff that you can't use. But
you use the interesting word there with the render, because again, I'm gonna speak towards California only. There's a distinction between dispose, destruct, and render. So in California, cannabis operations, before we pick it up, they need to render their material, meaning they need to mix it with some other organic material. They need to mix it up, blend it together so that it's made unusable and unrecognizable before any kind of disposal. Then we come in and do the disposal. So that's where
I think that sounds very similar to what it is in Illinois. And then so you step in after the license holder has complied with their complied with the regulations that they are subject to.
That it's the responsibility falls under them. We're just the waste management company that handles the transportation and the disposal. We obviously offer the benefit of the compliance end of it too, where we give a manifest and we prove some verification that we came and picked it up. But the responsibility to rendering it is on them, to making sure that it's unusable and unrecognizable. Because if you think about it, like let's say they have like their designated waste area outside and it's just filled with cannabis material, someone comes and tries to steal it, they're going to come and try and get your bud or your leaf or whatever, and they don't want that. They want to eliminate that. That's one of the reasons they want to eliminate that possibility. That's why they want the licensees to render it by themselves, so that when they go in and try and open that container up, it's just a bunch of organic material mixed up, blended together. They can't do anything with.
Right, and that sounds like maybe then you could expand into all those states, provided that was okay, because you're going to have a contract with the cultivator, and your contract, they pay you do the service of getting rid of that for them, so they don't have to have it, right?
Right. Yeah, we perform a service, and the thing is, like, what we're trying to do is because it's new, we're trying to create the standard. We want to create the standard that can be duplicated across, ideally across states, because they really don't know how to handle this, and that's where we want to bring our value in and say, look, this is the best way to handle these categories, these things. This is how you got to do it.
You know what you guys need? You need somebody to write you a law that says these are the regulations that are the best. And then you could be like, because it depends on if these are the reasonable regulations and then what municipal or state, like where do you insert these regs? Is this something that you convince the Department of Agriculture in the state of Illinois that are a great idea to help you? Then, boom, they've opened the state for you there. Or is this something that's a reasonable restriction as to the localities? And it doesn't sound like it does. It sounds like to me that this would be something that the state, perhaps in rules, would allow you to do. And not only that, but there are like approved providers when it comes to testing or other things like that. So, if you create your own standard and your own qualification, you're basically creating your own job. So that's just one of the cool things about the cannabis industry. It's creating all these other small industries and jobs around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly how we're looking at it too. It's something that's so new. It's like, well, there needs to be a solution for this. And it's reasonable to utilize our service, not just from the environmental side, but from a compliance side. Because a cultivator, they can say they throw away their waste in the dumpster and not really throw it away. How are you going to prove that they threw it away? How are you going to verify that? You got to have a third party come and document that.
And imagine the EcoWaste process is going to be the same in any state. Each state has the different rules for the structure, but in the end, when your processee doesn't really have to change, it can just be the same in every state. Am I thinking correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it's because it's not all that complicated. At the end of the day, a cannabis operation here is going to be making the same material as someone in Illinois or in Colorado or in Washington. It's the same thing. It's really the same process. Yeah, they have their small little nuances, but you're growing a plant, selling a plant, you're disposing a plant. That's really it, on the cultivator side, at least.
Yeah. No, that's a great little niche you got going on now.
Yeah, it's fun. We're enjoying it.
So, like, did you guys always start with cannabis disposal, or has this been a family business in the disposal industry? And tell us more about the company.
Yeah, I mean, Specifically, this company had a little bit of a interesting background. I mean, we opened the company in 2016, and we were angling to go into the more food waste environment, where we would collect, disposed food waste that we're diverting it from the landfill, so we can then mulch up together, compost it, make it a little bit more environmentally friendly. And then we kind of didn't really put too much pressure on that. And around last year, around February-ish, I'd say 2018. We started getting phone calls at our BioWaste company for cannabis waste. So, we kind of got a little curious. We asked a couple of buddies that we had, me and my partner, we asked little buddies that we had in the industry, and they said, yeah, this is a real thing. You should look into it. We looked into the cannabis side of it, and we decided that, this is what we're going to use this company for. We're going to go in and we're going to provide this service for the cannabis industry. But it's kind of like a family business. Me and my partner have been friends for a long time, and, we kind of just joined forces. He brought me on the BioWaste side, and then we opened up the Eco one together.
Yeah, but I hear this story a lot. Like you said, it was a business that was going on, and all of a sudden, this new revenue stream opens up to them because cannabis is there. And it's not just in the waste disposal, it's in security. People that provide security consulting and licenses, or not licenses, but security consulting and services to businesses for outfitting whatever type of business has stuff that you want protected, and then they watch it. And that's actually built into the law in Illinois. You need a contract with a security consultant because of the amount of cameras and stuff that you need running to conduct your operation. And so they've got that one in there. And then not only that, then I have people that are in the construction field themselves, not the security field, but the construction fields. And suddenly a new seam of revenue is opened up to them because they have to design and then to build all these new types of structures that didn't exist until the legislative change. And the legislative change brought very, very stringent requirements through the statute and also through the regulations for how these places where they cultivate the cannabis are supposed to be designed, or how the places where they dispense the cannabis are supposed to be designed. So it's created ancillary businesses, and it's just going to continue doing it.
Yeah.
Arman, I got a question though too. In regards to, you've been in business for 2 years. You're an auxiliary company where it comes to, you don't deal with the cannabis except for throwing it away. Does the 280E affect you? Can you guys use the 280E?
280E, could you expand on that?
For taxes for business? Are you able to, file like a regular business, or are you, because you work with cannabis, not allowed?
No, we're classified as a waste management company. So, since we directly deal with the cannabis, it's already supposed to be rendered. We don't necessarily have cannabis. We have waste. That's what we deal with. We're a waste management company that specializes in cannabis.
Neat.
Yeah, so that kind of little loop, but we haven't had any issues.
Well, I don't know. I mean, let me be devil's advocate, and for God's sakes, I hope that the thing about it is they're not enforcing the laws. Like Trump said last week, right? We are allowing that, or whatever the heck that means. So they aren't enforcing the laws. But then if you look at what IRC 280E says and extrapolate, can they? It's, the trafficking of the cannabis. And so you're providing a service that's related to the cost of goods sold of the cannabis, because you're only dealing with the cannabis waste. You see, they wouldn't have had that waste if they didn't make that cannabis, but under the federal law, of course, it's called marijuana. So because of that, I think you would be accepted from IRC 280E as you are on the cost of goods sold side and not the carrying on in trafficking side.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say I speak that. That's not where my area of expertise lands in. But it's possible. I mean, so far we haven't had any issues. We didn't have to do any wiggling or anything. We are waste management. Now, a point that I think is something to be brought for sure is on the consumer side, on our client side, what they can do on it with it. I don't know if they're able to write off. I wouldn't know. I hope they would be able to write off our services as something.
The cultivators can. The cultivators are all about cost of goods sold because they're the ones who's literally making it. So they have the best 280E protections.
Right. Yeah.
Growers do. Yeah. The 280E is basically hit by the retail side, the dispensing side. And that's one of the reasons why I think in the supply chain, they have that large cleavage between retail and cultivation, just to reflect the tax management planning that the industry has had to face since day one.
So even though producers plant the seed and watering it and everything, the actual product itself, they can still write off, like, say, fertilizer and
yeah, that's all cost of goods sold. That's COGS. But then you see, you take the cannabis, you manicure it, you put it in a nice jar, you send it out the door, and then the retailer buys it. That's trafficking. There's a difference, and that's where IRC 280 really stops. But that's awesome, man. I'm glad that there's been no hiccups. I was going to ask you, bank account. That's okay.
Yeah, everything's fine. We got a bank account. We got a merchant service. I mean, again, some merchants, when it came to credit, because we the forms of payment, we take a credit card. We don't deal with cash. We don't deal with any of that because we don't want to have any issues. We want everything documented, everything clean. We've had a little hiccups with merchants. Some merchants check out our website and like, no, but other merchants are like, okay, whatever. So banking has been fine, taxes have been fine, merchant accounts have been fine. We haven't had any issues yet. Knock on wood. So we've been good to go with all that so far.
Well, that raises a question for me then. You said that you only take payment via credit card?
Yeah, I mean, not that we only take payment. I mean, we're open to cash and to check and everything as well, but we really strongly our policy is to get credit cards because we don't want to deal with any of the challenges that comes with cash and with checks. Because clients, first of all, don't have checks. They don't have bank accounts.
Wait, that's what I was going to ask. Like, if the clients don't have, if they all are dealing in cash and you're only taking credit cards, that means that there's cannabis businesses that are your clients that are paying you in a credit card.
Well, they're paying with their personal cards, and then they're writing that throughout. Depending on how they're doing their taxes, if they're an S corp, for example, with the pass-through, they'll be able to. I don't know how they're going to deal with that, but we make it's our policy. I'd say about 9 out of 10 of our customers are with the credit card, and it's their personal card. Some of them have their business cards. They've maybe found a banking solution, but we do that because we want to be as safe as our end. We don't want to deal with the challenges. Of course, there's business problems with that too. It's like we don't want to deal with collections, having to call and everything like that. So that's a business choice too, from our end.
It's funny you mentioned about credit card issues, Tom. Dr. Dina, the other side of Freedom Grow, Citibank just pulled her credit card. She posted on Twitter today that F you, Citibank, perfect credit score, and it's because she owns a dispensary.
Citibank, bad people.
Yeah, for sure.
They didn't want to take that cannabis money. I'm sure they used to work with the Nazis, though.
Oh yeah, GE and all the other efforts.
Yeah. If she would have been selling opioids, like at a pill mill in Florida, like in 2004, they would have taken the money.
Oh yeah, easily. But shit.
That's how we've really delved deep into an episode. We get to the point where it's like, shit. What else is going on, man? That's great. Lauren, why don't you bring us up to speed on some things?
Yeah, it's started to be that time, but we did have a question come in from Shadows McGee. What are your thoughts on Illinois creating a cannabis task force for local cities and out west with you guys where Rec's already in full swing? Do you guys see anything like that over there?
As far as California, a specific task force on the local level, no. It's just cities handling it, and the BCC themselves, they collaborate depending on the area. So, for example, the BCC, the regulatory agency here in California, let's say they'll collaborate with LAPD and LA City because we have a department here too. So they'll all collaborate, and they'll decide who's going to be the one knocking on the actual door. But there's no specific task force yet.
Wow, Washington has the Washington State LCB. You have a governing body, and then you have little officers that run around and ticket everybody and nickel and dime everybody for their interpretation of the rules. So we do have people running around doing that. But Tom, you're saying that there's no enforcement body in Illinois?
What he just explained for California is actually quite similar to what they have in Illinois. So it is a lot of power for reasonable restrictions at the municipal level, whether they're going to allow it or not, and like what the setbacks are and what the hours are. And just like they're regulating it like alcohol, which is a very local regulation as well. But then there are the states for like keeping in compliance with the terms of your license, and that's either you're going to be in the regulatory body of the IDPFR, the Financial and Professional Regulation, or you're going to be dealing with the Department of Agriculture. There's no liquor control board like you have in Washington State, and it sounds like, from what Arman was saying, I'm kind of happy that Illinois chose to go along the lines of the California solution, because it sounds like it has a lot fewer problems, to be honest.
Yeah, no, we run into an issue. They overstepped their boundaries. Last year, there was a podcast, the Chronic Cast. They were part of High Times as well, and they were in the back of a dispensary or pot shop, not dispensary no more. That was actually a separate section of the building, like just directly behind it. But people were consuming on camera and talking, and our governing body actually got the police involved, sectioned off the whole neighborhood, and raided the podcast, confiscated all their equipment because they were breaking rules of consumption in a building next to the store. But they were two separate entities. Like, they had it approved a year prior by another LCB officer who said, yeah, just seal up this wall and you're good to go. And then somebody else, because they were getting popular and with High Times, they got raided.
Yeah, I do not want our podcast to get so popular that, because it wouldn't happen in Illinois or in California. But, I'm worried about you, Miggy. I don't want the cops to come in and drag you out of there because the LCB acts a fool again and you get too popular.
Well, if I get too popular, that means somebody important saw it and I just got fired. So that's okay.
Oh, that's good. You know what it also means? It means that you've probably been sticking around on cannabis legalization news, and we are on like episode number 1300 or whatever the heck Joe Rogan's on, right?
Right. No, it's good stuff.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Well,
All right. Well,
thank you so much for joining us. Where can we follow you and find what's going on at EcoWaste Services?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty heavy on LinkedIn. So they can find us at just, EcoWaste Services on LinkedIn. And then there's our Instagram and Twitter, Facebook, all at Real EcoWaste. We have a cool blog too. And, they can find us pretty much on every social platform, the general social platforms.
Awesome. Miggy, where can we find you?
WeNews.co and just Google Miggy420. You'll see me all over.
Awesome. And Tom, what's going on?
You can Google cannabis lawyer and you'll find my website, cannabisindustrylawyer.com. And next week, it's going to be here real soon. And I'm really stoked about the guests. So hopefully everybody really tunes in. We're going to be discussing cannabis legalization news with the one and only Keith Stropp from NORML, and we'll hopefully get a good update as to what's going on in the Safe Banking Act. And I'm also trying to set up a one-on-one interview with the author of the Safe Banking Act. His name's Adrian. We've kind of had some emails back and forth. Hopefully we get that pinned down, and there'll be just more cannabis legalization news coming to you every Wednesday at 2 p.m.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks.
Bye.